So the rumors of Final Fantasy VII Remake heading to the Nintendo Switch 2 are officially true, as it was revealed in today's Nintendo Switch 2 Direct that 7 Remake will be coming to the new console, but it's looking like it's not just going to be part 1. So we're going to take a look at that in today's video. If any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button, and if you're new here, you can subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments down below.
The rumors were true.
So I gotta say, first off, general impressions in regards to the Switch 2 in the Direct. I thought it was great. It was like 60 minutes long, but it flew by relatively well. They did a lot with the console, showing it off. They showed a ton of games. Donkey Kong Bonanza in particular looks insanely good, super fun. Mario Kart World is probably gonna sell like 50 million copies because it's Mario Kart and it's super popular. But that also looked pretty impressive too. Soul Calibur 2 has now been freed from its GameCube prison and is coming to NSO, which is going to be sick. And it is the GameCube version, so you can use Link. Soul Calibur 2 is such a good game. So to finally be able to play that again on modern hardware, especially with a GameCube controller, because they're going to release a new wireless GameCube controller, that is super cool. A new Souls game, The Dusk Bloods, was announced and seemingly is the spiritual successor to Bloodborne, and that whole situation is just really weird because for years people have wanted a Bloodborne sequel. Jim Ryan, the former president of Sony, seemingly did not care about doing that. He was all about live service games, and he's like, let's do 12 live service games and make a ton of money. That didn't work out, and they just kept putting something like Bloodborne on the back burner, and now it's looking like Miyazaki is like, fine, I'll go to Nintendo and we'll do a spiritual successor to Bloodborne if we're not going to do it here at Sony. So that's a pretty massive get for Nintendo. Now, there was one funny moment that had been rumored for a while, and some people were wondering, would Final Fantasy IX show up at this event? Well, there was one specific section in the sizzle reel of games where the Square Enix logo did pop up, and they showed a character, and from behind, it did look like Garnet/Dagger. So some of us did get baited out for a few seconds of like, oh, is this gonna be Final Fantasy IX Remake? But then the camera turns around and it's not Dagger. It is instead revealed to be a character from the Bravely Default series, which I've never played Bravely Default, and I know a lot of other people haven't because we all got baited with that trailer thinking it was going to be FF9. So to all the Bravely Default fans out there, you're getting another game. I think it might be like a remaster or something. It was early in the morning. I was trying to pay attention, so I didn't get all of the info, but I know those fans are probably super happy. Final Fantasy IX fans, we're going to have to wait a little bit longer, assuming that remake is real. And again, if it does have some sort of weird exclusivity attached to it via Sony, then I would assume the game would probably get announced at a State of Play. That just kind of seems to make the most sense. But I just thought that was a really funny moment because I've never played Bravely Default, so I'm not familiar with any of those characters. I'm just like, that looks a lot like Dagger. So overall, I would give the entire showcase probably like an A or like a B+. I thought it was really good. Some of the weird slight omissions were the price of the console itself, which they did not announce in the Direct itself. People had to go online afterwards to see that it looks like the price of the console with Mario Kart World bundled in is going to be about $480. Which means that Switch 2 games are seemingly going to be priced at $79.99. That seems to be the number that's popping up for things like Donkey Kong and Mario Kart, which really sucks because when the prices of games go up, they usually don't go down. So this kind of feels like it's opening up the floodgates for a lot of studios to start charging more for their games, which is probably going to mean Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to cost $100, which sucks. But I'm excited. I'm going to try and get my hands on one of these things. I have not owned a Nintendo console since the original Wii, so it's been a very long time. I missed out on so many cool games on the Switch, and with the Switch 2 being backwards compatible, that's going to be a nice option, although you are going to have to pay an upgrade fee if you already own the game on Switch and you want to play it on Switch 2. So they're pulling a bit of a Sony when it comes to that aspect. But for the reason why you guys are all here, in those sizzle reels was Naoki Hamaguchi announcing that Final Fantasy VII Remake will be heading to the Switch 2. But interestingly enough, the way he worded it, he said, please look forward to more information on the Final Fantasy VII Remake project coming to Nintendo Switch 2. So that pretty much confirms, yeah, the entire trilogy is going to be heading to the Nintendo Switch 2 at some point in time, with Remake most likely hitting this year, Rebirth probably next year, and Part 3 is still kind of up in the air. If I had to put a bet on it, and I hope I'm wrong, I would assume that Sony probably still has some sort of exclusivity window on Remake Part 3, so it'll come out on PS5 first, maybe have 5 months of exclusivity, then go to PC and hopefully Switch 2. There's no word on an Xbox version just yet, and I don't even know at this point if they're even considering Xbox, because I don't know how big of a determining factor Xbox would even be these days for Square Enix. I think you'd have to maybe consider something like Game Pass, which might be a little bit more profitable for them. So who knows what's going on with that front. But to see a big AAA mainline-ish Final Fantasy return to Nintendo is awesome. And so far, it looks like Remake Integrate is running pretty well on the Switch 2 based on the footage that they showed us. We only got a little bit. We got Cloud and Barret against the Guard Scorpion, and then we got a little bit of Cloud and Midgar fighting the soldiers. It looks relatively close to the PlayStation 4 version, which makes sense. If I remember correctly, the Switch 2 is about on par with a PS4 Pro, so I think it's going to handle Remake no problem. There's not really too many crazy action set pieces. I think like the craziest things might get is at the end of the game when you're inside of the Singularity and all of the stuff is flying around and you're doing all that cool stuff. But overall, just knowing that now, yes, it's officially true, it's been confirmed that 7 Remake is heading to the Switch is massive, because the Switch 2, I assume, is going to be a very big, popular console. I don't know if it's going to be as big as the Switch 1, only time will tell, but for Square Enix to get such an incredible game onto that platform, that now means millions upon millions upon millions of more potential customers getting eyes on your game, which could help the sales of 7 Remake and in turn Rebirth and Part 3, so on and so forth, you know. So to be slightly free of the shackles of Sony is really, really nice. Now, again, I'm pretty confident Remake will run just fine on the Switch 2. My one concern is Rebirth. Rebirth did have some performance issues even on the base PS5, which is more powerful than the Switch 2. Its graphics mode was fine, running at 30 frames, the game looked gorgeous, played really well, but when you swapped over to that performance mode, that's when you had a lot of kind of visual downgrades and compromises being made. Never with the frame rate though. The frame rate in my playthrough on performance mode held at a solid 60 frames just about the entire game. There was only one moment in particular when the frame started to dip a little bit, and it was on Gilgamesh Island when I was fighting the summons. There was just so much going on. There was, I think, like 3 summons out because I was battling 2 of them, and I had summoned my own. We're using spells and abilities, switching through the combat menu, and the game was like, hold on, man. I can't keep up. You gotta slow down for like a brief amount of time. But the frame rate was always good. It was the visual aspect that kind of struggled a bit with character models, environments, draw distances looking really fuzzy and blurry. So if a powerful PS5 was struggling with that, I'm kind of concerned for the Switch 2 in regards to how it could potentially run Rebirth. And granted, we have the Pro version of Rebirth out now. The devs have already made the PC port, so maybe they've found some kind of solution for some of those issues, or they've found a better way to optimize it for the Switch 2. It's also currently running on a Steam Deck, although performance does kind of vary for some people, but the fact that they even got Rebirth running on the Steam Deck might be a good sign that the Rebirth port on Switch 2 could potentially be somewhat solid. But I am very curious to see how they optimize that game, because the folks over at CS1 are super busy. They're working on Part 3, they were working on the PC port of Rebirth, and now they're working on the Switch 2 ports of Remake, and most likely Rebirth. So they got their hands full, but they've got a lot of knowledge built up over the past few years working on this project that I think they can probably hopefully put out a version that will be hopefully acceptable and will run very well. And again, it just leaves Part 3 up in the air. I'm really hoping I'm wrong. I really would love for Part 3 to launch on everything possible from the get-go, PS5, Switch 2, PC, maybe Xbox if they consider that. But if not, I'm sure somewhere down the line they'll release a Trilogy pack with Final Fantasy VII Remake, Rebirth, and Part 3 all available from the get-go, so that way people can catch up, because they did do that twin pack for Rebirth when that came out. It was on PC and it was also on PS5, so I'm assuming the Switch 2 at some point will get that twin pack as well, and then the triplet pack if you want to call it that. But I'm sure in the coming weeks and months we'll get a lot more information on the Switch 2 ports for Remake in particular, probably some articles from Square Enix and some other outlets that hopefully detail the process it took CS1 to put Remake onto the Switch, and I think that'll kind of give us an idea of what they could do with Rebirth in terms of optimization. Have they added any new features? Were there any sacrifices they had to make? I'm very curious about the technical end of porting these games and just making sure they come out great. But overall, this is a massive, massive win. I'm super happy as a Final Fantasy fan that these big AAA Final Fantasies are going to make a return to Nintendo. And I think that's a really good sign. If 7 Remake's project is coming to the Switch 2, I think that means future mainline Final Fantasies will probably also make the jump as well, assuming Square Enix again does get away from that exclusivity agreement they have with Sony and just focus on multi-platform. That's what's best for the franchise, and I really think that's one of the biggest issues the franchise is facing, is being locked to one console for a long period of time. And I think that's one of the reasons why a game like Rebirth probably didn't sell gangbusters right out the gate, because it was only on the PS5. But then it would come out on PC, sell relatively well, and I'm assuming, and crossing my fingers, that Remake and inevitably Rebirth will sell very well on the Switch 2. I know there's probably a lot of people that have been waiting to get their hands on this series, and they just couldn't because they didn't have a PlayStation console or a beefy PC. So this is a massive, massive win in my book. With that being said, that is the video. Let me know in the comments down below. I'm actually very, very curious. Are you someone who is going to double dip and buy 7 Remake again on the Switch 2? Or are you someone who never got a chance to even play Remake or Rebirth because you didn't have a good PC or a PlayStation and you were just holding out that maybe one day it would head to Xbox or a Nintendo console? I would love to hear from you guys in the comments down below. I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.